You know what? Enough of the entrance. I know you guys love it. Shout out to everybody in the chat, everybody on Twitter. Make sure you guys tell a friend and tell a friend. Share this thing out all over the globe. Welcome to another Raider Nation Unlimited. I'm your man, Wasted Talent. Let me tell y'all something. We have one of the YouTube GOATs backstage right now, the great and powerful Sanjit T from the Las Vegas Raiders Network. We got over 100 in the room. Get wasted with your brother, Wasted. My brother, Sanjit, is in the place to be. Sanjit, what's the deal, my brother? How are you?
Good, man. I am doing good, bro. I really appreciate you hitting me up, getting this show going. Always a great time being on with you, man. I always appreciate it. How you doing today?
Man, I just appreciate it, bro. I'm doing excellent, bro. Listen, man, we for the last few years, at least, when the offseason starts percolating, bro, I got to pull you up, man, because yo, I've been watching a lot of the videos you've been putting up, the shorts and stuff like that. And yo, there's been so much excitement around this organization, bro. Like Antonio Pierce, Coupon Tom, over here we call him Coupon Tom Telesco. He's a bargain basement shopper. We love what he's doing with the team. And OTAs just concluded, and we're in that weird space where we're waiting for us to go into actual training camp. So there's been a lot of news coming out of OTAs, and I really, really wanted to get your take on how you feel about the state of the Raiders right now. What you heard from OTAs, what you think, what you're feeling, and everybody knows Sanjit is the offensive line guru and aficionado, man. So really quickly, what have you been seeing, man? What have you been thinking about the offensive line?
Yeah, man. I've been talking to some people that are obviously there at OTAs. I don't have I'm not fortunate enough to be there yet, but hopefully during training camp we'll be able to get out there. It's actually interesting, last year, going into last year, I felt like, hey, our offensive line's not gonna be that good. Right? There's just individually there's not a lot of talent there. We really didn't address the right tackle position. And coming into this year, it's completely different. Like, we addressed the offensive line, right? We went out and got ourselves, we have our left tackle, we have a left guard. And even then, if Dylan Parham struggles, we have a guy who was a former Pro Bowler that could easily come in and step right in Andres Pete. We brought back Andre James. We went out and got ourselves another guy, right, in Jackson Powers Johnson. Obviously, Jackson Powers Johnson will play left guard this year. Parham's going to move over to right guard. But I feel like our offensive line should be better. You look at some of those moves that you're ultimately making. You're gonna hope that Thayer Munford takes that next step. And I've been very, very, very critical of Thayer Munford. You're gonna hope that he takes that next step. And if he isn't able to, then you got Delmar Glaze, you got Dalton Wagner, you got guys that are coming to potentially take that spot. I think the offensive line's definitely headed in the right direction. It's not even just the O-line. I hated some of the moves that Dave Ziegler made, and I'll be the first to tell you guys I hated them. But Trey Tucker apparently looks pretty damn good so far, right? AP just talked about it. Was it like Friday, I think, this past Friday? Apparently, Trey Tucker's taking that next step, and then we're seeing Michael Mayer, only in year 2. Apparently, he's going to be an absolute stud this year as well. I think the Raiders are going to be so much better this year, and as we kind of go forward. Now, that may not lead to actual success. Our quarterback position is kind of up in the air, but you look at some of the best teams out there. If you don't have a quarterback, but you have a roster, all it takes is for you to go out and actually get that quarterback.
Yeah.
Right? And there's quarterbacks available that you can always go out and bring in, draft or trade or whatever.
Yeah, see, now this is the thing for me, right? When I look at this Raider roster, the one thing that I'm hopeful about and that I love is that this is not just a collection of talent.
Right.
This is a team.
Right.
They've built this team. We have backups. We have first line starters. We have, a lot of young guys on the team. And one of the biggest things that have made me hopeful about this roster is the fact that we have 11 starters that are on rookie deals.
Right. Which is crazy.
Which is insane. We've never ever and I'm a little older than you, Sanjit, but I go back with this team, and that's the one thing that we've never been. We've never been fiscally responsible. Right. It was always with Al. He always pushed all his chips to the table. Right. He always was the kind of guy where he thought that we were just one player away from winning. And now what we're doing is we're building for the future.
Right, right.
Just I want you to touch on really quickly, man. You know, the fact that we didn't go out, we didn't go and throw the baby out with the bathwater and move up and get a quarterback. Do you really think that we could compete in the AFC West with having kind of a pedestrian quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely possible, right? And I not, I don't want to sound like a homer and just say, "Oh, we're going to win the Super Bowl this year," But I think it's possible to have success, right? I think it's possible to have a successful season, specifically because we've seen over the past. You look back and the NFL is different today than it was, even 15 years ago, right? It's much more offensive based, but defenses still win championships, right? I know, you had Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan that have been dominating the last, 5 to 10 years. But you've still had teams that have made it to the Super Bowl, right? The Eagles just last year had the best defensive line in the NFL. They broke the sack record, and they made it to the Super Bowl. And a big part of that was because the defense. And I know the offense had success as well, but a defense helped them ultimately get there, right? They won games because of that defense. Then you can just look back even beyond that. You look, the Niners had a dominant defense. The Seahawks had a dominant defense 10 years ago. I think it is possible to have a dominant defense and make it into the playoffs and have success and actually win games. I think it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and really, really quickly, I want to go back a little bit. Now, one of the big reasons why I brought you on is because I totally value your opinion. I love your opinion. One of the guys that in this space that I respect your football mind. It's not a whole lot. But you're on a very short list of guys whose football mind I respect. If we're going to give grades out, right, let's start from the offensive line. As of right now, A, B, C, D, E, F, like we're in school. What are you grading the offensive line at this stage in the game? Even though there's no pads, we haven't seen much. What are you grading the offensive line at this point?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to give it a grade. I'd say my grade will be somewhere between a B- and a C+. Right. And that's solely based off of not being biased and also understanding that, Thayer Munford might not be a good tackle, right? There's a chance he's not going to be a good tackle. Right?
Really?
And I look, I've watched a lot of Thayer Munford tape, and I try not to take this approach where I'm negative towards Thayer Munford, right? I don't want to be negative towards any player. But, there's moments last year when I watched his tape and I said, hey, it's 3rd and 8, 5-man protection. You come out in shotgun. Thayer Munford's in a one-on-one. He has to win his block, right? There's no tight end to chip. There's no running back to influence the defensive end. One-on-one, he has to shut this guy down, and then he struggles in those moments, right? When he's in a true one-on-one on an island, he struggles, and that's because of the fact that he's not super explosive and super quick, right? He's strong as hell. Don't get me wrong. Very, very powerful. If he gets his hands on you, he's going to win the rep. But there's moments where he struggles to move, and to me, I'm not going to just say it until he comes out and actually proves it. I won't say Thayer Munford's, going to be the future of the future of the Raiders at right tackle, right? I need him to actually show that. Based off his tape last year, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to show that, right? So I need him to be able to show that.
Now, I have to push back a little bit, right? Now, last year, Thayer Munford was all up and down the offensive line, right? He played 208 snaps at left tackle. He played 263 at right tackle. Right. He had total of 521 offensive snaps, 1 penalty, 4 sacks allowed. The 5 hits allowed is what concerns me, and the 28 total pressures concerns me. But overall, he was graded out pretty high. Pass blocking is definitely the issue there. Yeah. But I think with Thayer Munford, I think it's more so leaving him at one position. Like, I know you have to be versatile. I understand that. But I really believe with a young player like that, for him, if you take him, red circle him at right tackle and leave him there, I believe that he can flourish. I love Thayer Munford.
Yeah, it's interesting because if he could play one position, I don't remember who it was, but recently one of the coaches said, it may have been our offensive line coach, but someone said something to the tune, and maybe it was when they were talking about Dylan Parham permanently going to right guard. I believe they mentioned something like, even Thayer Munford might feel better or more comfortable at left tackle. Right. And I almost feel like Thayer Munford is better at left tackle than he is at right tackle. Have you ever noticed that?
He's much better at left tackle. He's much better. I personally tend to think that he has a future being our left tackle of the future because of, Colton Miller getting a little long in the tooth, and maybe, the contract might not line up. I think he could be a contender for that. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah. Here's another thing to note on Thierry Munford. I'm not out on Thierry Munford. I'm cool with him having the opportunity this year, right? It's his third year. It's the year for him to prove himself. And he did play pretty well last year, right? I can't say the guy was absolutely terrible 100% of the time. That's not fact, right? He had a lot of really, really good reps. The thing that concerns me about Thierry Munford is, when you look at stats, right? Let's say you say, all right, so one guy gave up 4 sacks, and then you look at another guy, and let's say that guy gave up 4 sacks.
Yeah.
Those 2 seasons aren't necessarily the same, right? Because offensive schemes are going to allow some guys to have more success, right? And what I mean by that is this. Last year, Thierry Munford had tight end help a ton, right? They put a tight end almost on his side almost every single snap.
Yeah.
Right. There were probably 3 to 5 snaps a game. So sometimes it'd be like 7 snaps where he didn't have that tight end help. Right. So it's very hard to actually find those snaps where he didn't have tight end help. Yeah. But we helped him a lot last year. And here's the thing, when you got Penei Sewell starting at right tackle, or you have Trent Williams starting at left tackle, you don't have to chip with your tight end on those guys. Those guys will just dominate whoever it is, right? They'll have success against whoever it is. So what happens when George Kittle doesn't have to help Trent Williams is George Kittle can go line up or actually just straight up run a route out of that inline position. But when Michael Mayer has to chip on the guy that's ultimately over there, Munford, his release is a little bit slower. He's not going to be able to get downfield in his route because he's chipping. Right? That's going to take a second, 1.5 seconds. So now his route is going to be limited. He's only going to run 5 to 7 yards, if that. Right? So, you can help a tackle on every single play. And that tackle won't ever give up any sacks. They won't have any losing snaps. But what happens when that tackle has to be in a one-on-one, right? Can you trust that tackle to win? And that's one of the things I do all the time. Right? I look at tackles who are in one-on-one situations. So when I look at their Munford last year in one-on-one situations, he struggled at times with speed. He struggled with guys that are a little bit quicker. So that's what I need to see if he'll be able to kind of have success against that this season.
Yeah. No, that's 100% right, Sanjit. I noticed a lot of times they helped him when it was a lot of max protect.
Right.
He would always have that. The funny thing was they didn't do that with him when he had to go over there at left, which is a little strange to me. I know he played in college at Ohio State. Right. He played left tackle a lot. Right. Maybe his skill set is more suited to left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I mean, so another thing that I kind of find interesting is, a third round pick isn't, if you draft someone with a third round pick, I would say you're hoping that guy develops into a starter, right? He's not day one ready, but you're hoping that in 1 or 2 years, he's ready to be the starter, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I totally agree with that. Yeah, that's premium draft capital.
Absolutely. So to me, it's interesting that the Raiders, like AP was here last year, right? He saw Thierry Munford, right? He's been able to scout this guy and analyze this guy. I know Tom Telesco's a little new, but to me, the fact that they took a tackle with that pick, when we already have one tackle, right? Colt Miller is going to be here, I think, just based on his contract for at least a couple more seasons.
Yeah.
Right. It's still interesting to me that you spent that pick on a tackle. If you felt that Thierry Munford was the guy, you should have just taken someone else. You could have taken a linebacker at that pick, right? There was a ton of really good linebackers available. You could have possibly taken a running back with that pick. So I just find it interesting to see, how it's going to kind of, how it kind of pans out this season. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, when they took Glaze, right?
Yeah,
I think that was the place where you would take an offensive line, because if you look at the way the board lined up,
right,
there were not a lot of draftable linebackers in this draft, right? Like a guy like Peyton Wilson, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Peyton Wilson was still available, right? Peyton Wilson had a catastrophic,
right. Yeah.
His knee wasn't right. So I understand the Raiders wanting to take a clean player,
right?
And taking a running back in the 3rd round, and we already drafted a running back a couple of years ago.
Right.
For us, to me, the way their board lined up, I think it would even have been defensive back and or tackle. So I understand them drafting Glaze at that point, right? The only thing that I look at when I look at this offensive line, we pretty much have most of this offensive line figured out. Right guard, I think Dylan Parham is a starter. Right. I think Andre James as a center is a top 10 center in the National Football League. That Colton Miller, top 10 left tackle in the National Football League. I will say that confidently, right? the two issues on this line is Thayer Munford, as we've talked about,
Right.
and Jackson Powers Johnson. Now, I like Jackson Powers. We spoke about this off air. I love the fact that, he looks like he can be an all-pro center. But if I'm being honest, he was not the best guard in college. And for me to expect him to come into the National Football League and just be a slam dunk lead pipe starter, at left guard, I think is a little ambitious. I mean, what do you think about Jackson Powers Johnson winning that starting job?
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe that Cody Whitehair will beat out Jackson Powers Johnson. I don't think that's going to happen, right? I don't have Cody, because Cody Whitehair is what, 31 to 30, like 31 or 33. I forget. He's one of those.
He's 33.
33. I find it hard to believe that he's going to beat out Jackson Powers Johnson. And I'll be the first to tell you, I love the Jackson Powers Johnson pick if he was our center, right? If the goal was that in 2 years this guy's going to take over at center, I would have loved the pick. But the fact that he's actually at guard, I don't like the pick as much. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. I love Jackson Powers Johnson. I think you have a little bit of hesitancy because of the fact that he struggled in just the year before, right? 2022, he struggled a little bit at guard.
Yes, he did.
And then last year, he transitioned over to center, and he was a phenomenal center. But now he's going back to guard, and we've seen him, and he wasn't that good. I will say this with him, right? He was 18 years old 2 years ago, right? When he was the starting guard for the Oregon Ducks, he was 18 years old at that point. So to me, he just turned 21, literally like 3-4 months ago. He's so young. There's just no way he won't be able to have success long term. Now, some people do have some people do have question marks around the injuries that he's had, right? Senior Bowl, he got knocked out, right? He wasn't able to practice. He had some sort of injury. At Oregon, he also had an injury. I don't know if it was his final year. If he had an injury, if it was the year before.
It was the year before.
And he had an injury here at OTAs as well, right? Like
he did.
We don't know what it was, but I do think the way he plays, where he's super aggressive, helmet, head right into the chest of whoever, and he plays super aggressive. I don't know if long term that's going to allow a guy to stay healthy as well, right? But I will say this with Powers Johnson: the guy is very, very good technique. He's strong. The upside's there for sure, right? The upside's there. In terms of as a day one starter, I think there's some question marks for sure there, especially since he's going over to left guard, a position he's never really played.
Yeah. I mean, and to get into a little of his injury history, he was forced to withdraw from the Senior Bowl because of a hamstring injury after second day of practice. He had a hip and a groin injury last season and has reportedly dealt with concussions. So, when they were talking about grading this pick, Albert Breer actually brought this up, was saying that he's not the cleanest medically. Right. So that was another red flag for me. Right. Really, really quickly, Sanjit, we got some supers. You guys, shout out to everybody in the room. We got almost 500 in the room. Get wasted with your brother, wasted. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And now we have the Professor Sanjit looking as clean as ever with the Stanford button down, looking like a part of the staff. Man, I love it, man. My guy, Josh Chopper with the $5 holler. Salute wasted to Sanjit. Yo, in y'all's opinion, who are some sleeper players on both defense and offense that can have a breakout year? Raiders. Yo, Josh, don't jump the line. Don't jump the line. We were getting into that, but you know what? Sanjit, the transition. You know what? We'll table that. We'll get there. We'll get there, Josh. Don't worry. We're going to put a pin in it. The great and powerful Sanjit T is in a place to be. My guy, Big Valboski, Sanjit, given a new offensive line scheme, 12 personnel, block, I guess he's talking about 12 personnel. He said 12-man blocking concept. But he's talking about 12 personnel because of the two tight ends. Blocking concept versus old offense. You still have a concern for Munford? Great show, wasted. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I'm sure Sanjit answered that previously, but I'll allow you. You got to do your thing, bro. I think Sanjit will always have a problem with Thayer Munford until he shows improved, right?
Right. I just want to say this. Thayer Munford was drafted by Josh McDaniels for the power scheme. All right, and we know Munford's strong as hell. This scheme's going to be different. We're going to run a lot more zone. But you got to be quicker. You got to be faster. You got to be more explosive. This scheme fits Andre James a lot better. This scheme fits Dylan Parham a lot better. Colton Miller, I think, can play both schemes, but he's probably a little bit better in zone as well. Powers Johnson, phenomenal in zone. I think Munford's the one guy where the scheme does not favor him.
Ooh.
Right? I think the power scheme of McDaniels favored Munford more than this year's zone scheme. And that's why I've had concerns, right? It's not new. I watched Luke Getsy's tape from last year. I knew what he ran already. We all knew. It's a zone guy, right? So I think that's why I've always had kind of, those concerns with that.
Yeah.
With Munford specifically.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, when you talk about James Craig, coming from San Francisco, you have a guy who is probably the best left tackle I've seen since Jonathan Ogden. The guy's a freak of nature. I see him beating running backs down the field.
Right.
So not only is he powerful and he's a monster,
Absolutely.
but he is an exceptional. Like to be real with you, Trent Williams, and I hate to bloviate over players, but we got to be honest here. Trent Williams is the best tackle that I've seen probably in the last 20 years, bro.
Yeah.
He really is. He's that special. First ballot Hall of Fame player. So it's very, very hard to get the same kind of production in your blocking scheme from a guy like Adair Munford as opposed to a guy like Trent Williams. And you're absolutely right. The scheme does not. The one thing I will say, and I'm going to put a pin in and we're going to move on, is that Adair Munford came into camp, lost weight.
Absolutely.
Way better shape.
Huge.
And I think we're going to get a better player this year. I really, really do, man.
Yeah. Year 3 elite, man. We saw Malcolm Kuntz break out, so hopefully we see Munford take that same step.
Yeah, man. Elite messed that. Now, Elite, I'm going to be honest with you. Shout out to Elite. I'm going to get to some of the comments in the chat because, this is live. A lot of times when I have a guest on, guys, I'm sorry. When you got Sanjit cooking, I can't interrupt. But I think this one is pertinent to what we're talking about. Coach Craig came here from San Francisco because he felt we had better talent. Trent is the only good player. No, Elite, I think you are very, very off base, and I don't know that's why. Look, these guys are in the business of making money. They're in the business of improving their profile. I think when you coach under Kyle Shanahan, you kind of got to go and spread your wings and show that it's not all him. Because, listen, Kyle Shanahan on both sides of the football is a very, very strong and domineering presence when it comes to how that team plays. Yeah, but Sanjit, so, all right, offensive line. Now, the defensive line, we know that's probably our best positional grouping. We don't really need to bloviate over that. But getting back to the question I was asked previous, man, who's the guy on his roster that you've heard at OTAs? I know you have your ears there. You got people there. We got people there, Graphic and myself. Who's the guy that you expect to break out this year that nobody's thinking about?
I actually made a video on him today. We've talked about it a little bit, but I think Trey Tucker is going to break out this year. What's interesting is I watched Trey Tucker's tape earlier today. I was watching his tape and, just not like highlights, right? I'm not watching his highlights. I'm watching like just this guy running routes and is he getting open? Is the quarterback missing him? Trey Tucker moves. He moves really, really, really well.
Yes, he does.
And I read a report today. I actually did not previously know this, but apparently he had an injury last year.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and
breaking news on Raider Nation Unlimited. Trey Tucker was in. Thank you, Sanjit. Appreciate you.
Right. So I don't know, man. I think Trey Tucker has a chance to absolutely break out, and it's crazy because how do you use all these guys? Like, how do you use all these weapons? You got Davante Adams, you got Jacoby Myers, you got Trey Tucker, you got the 2 tight ends and Bowers and Mayer, you got Zamir White and Madison. That's like 7-8 guys right there. How do you get all of these guys touches?
That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. Look, I just feel like, especially with 12 personnel, man, and you look at what Getsy runs. He's been a master at running that, and he did that with a guy like with Cole Kmet, where I think Cole Kmet is a phenomenal tight end, right? But I don't think Cole Kmet holds a candle to either one of our tight ends. They definitely didn't have the equal of Mayer or Bowers in Chicago. They didn't have the personnel. Look, Moore and all them guys, they're good, but it's not what we have here. We have a special situation, bro. And I'm looking at this, and when I look at what Georgia did, especially the year before under their old offensive coordinator who is now with the Baltimore Ravens, and you see what he's been able to do with the Ravens, right?
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you. It's a scary proposition if Aiden O'Connell can stay upright about what this offense is going to do. I think the guy that's going to break out that no one expects to break out, I really believe if you can keep Aiden O'Connell upright, I think Aiden O'Connell is going to have a year where people don't expect. I really do.
Point.
because he has a myriad of weapons. If you could protect a guy like that who's big, strong, processes well, and throws the ball hard, and once he develops touch, because you develop touch with reps, I think Aiden O'Connell is going to be the guy that no one expects to break out this year.
Yeah, I heard Aiden O'Connell has been working with Tucker and Myers. The two guys have been working this offseason, which is great. Like they've been putting the work in, I think there's a chance Aiden O'Connell does break out, right? There's definitely a chance that Aiden O'Connell breaks out this season. What about on the defensive side? Who you have any guys on the defensive side that you think are going to break out?
Oh, yes. I mean, look, this guy is a guy who, look, is it really calling a breaking out? But I think Trayvon Merrick is going to be a star. I think he's trending towards a place where, look, man, this is a guy who everybody every year complains because we expected him to be one of the best safeties in football because of, when he came out in that draft, he was the consensus guy, right? Javon Holland's kind of been that guy in the National Football League. But the thing I think that's going to help Merrick is the fact that he's in the same scheme for the third year in a row.
Absolutely.
That is going to be. I think you're going to get a different guy. And last year he started getting his hands on the football. Right. Previous years he had some opportunities to intercept the football. He would drop it. Last year that wasn't happening. Causing forced fumbles and things of that nature. I think Merrick is the guy, man. And if you look at his snap share, this is a guy who's on the field almost 100. He took almost 100% of the snaps in 2023. Week 1, he had 92% of the snaps. And week 15, he had 66% of the snaps because I think he got his bell rung a little bit. But the rest of the weeks he played, he had 100% of the snaps.
It's crazy.
So his usage is off the charts, man. And if you look at the fact that he is a clean prospect, man, this is a guy who has not really had any injuries of note in the National Football League at this point. Merrick is my guy, and I know that's a safe pick, and I know a lot. It's not earth shattering to people, but damn it, that's the guy that I'm thinking. And if you want a sleeper, I'm going to be honest with you, man. I love the way I'm hearing that they're going to use Isaiah Palmel. I love it.
Right.
I think he's a guy that is going to earn himself a contract this year.
Yeah, I do. First and foremost, I love Trayvon Merrick, man. It's crazy. Last year, I think after the first 2 games, people were posting on Twitter. They're talking so much shit about this guy. They're like, oh, it's time to cut him. He sucks. Look at this catch that he gave up. And sometimes I feel like with safeties, especially, a safety is such a hard position because you're almost you're reacting and a ball gets thrown to a wide receiver. You're not going to just stand there. You're trying to make that play. So oftentimes what happens is when a receiver catches a pass, the safety is just entering the frame. Right? They're just kind of running into that frame. So people assume that it's this guy's responsibility. Right. And Trayvon Merrick got killed at the beginning of last year, but I'm glad he finished last year strong. And I'm glad that the Raiders had a good season last year on the defensive side because he deserves a lot of credit for that. Right. Yes, he had a really, really good year last year. And another thing with safeties is how do you really tell if a guy has a good year at safety? Right. It's really just interceptions. Right. That's all you can really consider. But you don't think about, when guys are running post routes and, Amik Robertson gets beat and then Trayvon Merrick takes that away. Right. So people don't think about all the little schematic things that kind of go into it. A guy that I think is going to break out. I do agree with you with Isaiah Palmel, but a guy that I think is going to break out this year is going to be defensive tackle Matthew Butler. Matthew Butler is a guy that I think has pass rush upside, and he hasn't been able to put it together. And I think even last year he didn't play a ton. But, if he's able to get some snaps, I think there's upside with Matthew Butler. I actually like Matthew Butler. Just watching the tape between him and Byron Young, I like Matthew Butler more this year than I do like Byron Young. But I think Young, based off the fact that he was a healthy scratch a lot last year, and based off of what both guys have shown, Matthew Butler, to me, has pass rushing skills, right? Like you can see this guy use his hands. You can see this guy beat the guys in front of him. And I think D tackles, I remember Mo Hurst, the Raiders drafted this guy, I believe was like 5th round. He struggled a little bit. But then, as he kind of got a little bit older, he started playing better. And then he left the Raiders and he kind of broke out. I think he went to the Niners first, and now he's with the Browns. D tackle takes a little bit longer. Even Quinnen Williams, they say he was the best defensive tackle prospect since Aaron Donald when he came out.
Yes, they
did.
He
struggled for like a year or two. Right? And then he really took off, and people don't give him the credit, but he's probably like the 4th or 5th best defensive tackle in the NFL. Christian Wilkins struggled a little bit early on. And now you look at what he did the past 2 years, right? He looks so much better. And Matthew Butler is a guy that I think has a potential to break out.
You know, the funny thing with Matthew Butler is when he came out of Tennessee, everyone was saying, because he was one of these guys who had that the COVID year. So he had an extra year eligibility. So he was essentially in college, what, like 6 years or something like that. So they said when he came to the National Football League, he was a full grown man. He was going to be a guy that come and be a leader in the locker room, all these things, right?
Right.
The problem is that the positional grouping of the Raiders right now, that is probably the most log jammed spot, and there's only a certain amount of reps to go around, man.
Right.
I think, man, that Matthew Butler is going to have a hard time making the roster, Sanjit. I really do, because if you look at it, man, you know, we can break this down. Christian Wilkins, of course, right? Adam Butler, of course.
Right.
These are two guys we're depending on. Big John Jenkins, even though he's a little long in the tooth, he is our nose.
Right.
He's a guy who's played for Patrick Graham. He's a guy that Graham. So I think those three guys, you can red circle them. They are going to be guys that make this roster.
Right.
Now, when you start looking and you talk about the young guys, the Byron Youngs of the world, the Marquand McCalls of the world. Marquand McCall has something that you can't teach. And, you know, pause if necessary, but it's elite size.
Right.
And then when you look at a Nessa J. Silvera is a guy who has connections to Antonio Pierce. Right. So it's like, you know, I think it's going to be between those two guys. I think that Byron Young, just based off of the fact of how high he got drafted,
right,
I think Byron Young makes the roster, right?
Right.
He was a guy that they were dependent on.
So I think we're going to keep at least 5 defensive tackles. And I do agree, you know, Wilkins, Butler, Jenkins, Byron Young. Those 4 guys are for sure making the roster. And then from there's 3 guys that will probably compete for that 5th and final position. It's going to be between Matthew Butler, Marquand McCall, Nessa J. Silvera. And then you do have the 2 UDFAs, which, you know, there's always that wild card that one of these guys ends up flashing. You know, you never know, right? But, you know, the thing with Marquand McCall is, yes, he has massive football player. He's probably the number 2 guy with the John Jenkins role, right? John Jenkins is really our nose tackle. Marquand McCall is the other guy that's really that nose tackle. Christian Wilkins, Adam Butler, they're the pass rushers, right? They're the guys that are going to want in there on third downs. But where does Byron Young play? What, you know, where exactly is his role going to be? Because he's not big enough to be a nose, and he doesn't have the pass rushing skills yet, right? And I know we're not going to, you know, most likely we're not going to release Byron Young, right? I would find that hard to believe that at 1 year after we draft him, we release him. But, you know, let's say Matthew Butler's a lot better than him, and let's say, you know, Marquand McCall looks really, really good as well, and you have to make that tough decision. Do you see a world where the Raiders do release Byron Young?
I mean, anything's possible. That's what happens on talented football teams, right? But when I look at Matthew Butler, right, I look at a guy where I don't think his ceiling is as high as a Byron Young. I think Byron Young, my pro comp was Justin Tuck. He's one of those tweener tackles that you can line up with. He's actually played defensive end and tackle. And I think the fact that, you know, he was a healthy scratch. A lot of this stuff has really to do with Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels is not a guy that believes in rookies. And you can see the usage rate for a lot of our rookies went up as soon as he was fired. And I think Byron Young kind of got caught into that. And then I know he dealt with, you know, getting dinged up a little bit last year. I think Byron Young, like from a talent standpoint, when I look at him on film and I look at Matthew Butler on film, it's not very close. I think Byron.
I agree. I agree with what you're saying. Byron Young's ceiling is way higher, right? But you know, Cleveland Farrell had a pretty high ceiling coming out. So did Alex Leatherwood, and it doesn't always work out, right? And it's going to be interesting, man. I do want to say I think our defensive line is so freaking stacked that we're arguing about. Not arguing, but we're debating like Byron Young, a third round is, you know, like we're debating about.
Yeah, it's like splitting hairs. No matter what, I think we're going to be fine at that.
Right. I mean, it's crazy because 4 years ago, Byron Young, we would have been like, man, this guy's our starting D tackle this year.
Yeah, right. Unbelievable, man. So moving on, right to the next level of defense, the linebacker core. Now we know Patrick Graham is a guy who runs a lot of sub packages. A lot of the times, he uses the defensive back as the third linebacker, i.e. Nate Hobbs, kind of like a wheel linebacker. Yep. So most of the time, the Raiders, 79% of the time, the Raiders are running with two linebackers. Now,
Right.
we know Spill had a terrific year last year. We can only hope that Robert Spillane has the same year and he can duplicate what he did last year, right?
Right.
Divine Diablo, what say you about Divine Diablo and where you feel like he needs to kind of make that ascension? Because look, Divine Diablo is a guy that I've always been high on athletically,
Yeah.
but it seems like he tackles, when you look at the stats, the stat line is very deceiving because you look at him and you're like, man, this guy, he's chased, he has all these tackles and this and that. He's so fast, and he was a former DB, but a lot of his tackles are him chasing people down.
Right. Right.
Him not recognizing, him not sniffing the play out and making those tackles in the backfield. I don't see a lot of that from Divine Diablo.
Yep.
Is Divine Diablo a guy that you could see possibly, losing minutes or possibly being replaced?
Yeah, I mean, this is his final year. I think Divine Diablo will not be with the Raiders next year, unless he takes a massive step this year, because athletically, the guy is super gifted. It's crazy. I was watching a video of the linebackers practicing, right? And, you look at Robert Spillane, he's whatever, not super athletic. You look at, Tommy Eichenberg, not that athletic. And then you watch Divine Diablo, and this guy just moves differently. He's way bigger than everyone. He looks stronger. He's a lot more athletic. But that hasn't translated to the actual field. All right. But I will say this with Divine Diablo, what he has, you can't really teach it. All right. And it's not like he's, not smart. The guy's a very smart football player. Right. But I think the big thing with Diablo was, when he came into the NFL, initially he was in that Gus Bradley scheme. Right. And linebackers in that scheme really played a lot of zone defense. They really played, a specific style. But this year, now he's going into the third year under Patrick Graham. This should be the year that he's able to put it together. And if he's not able to, I think the Raiders are going to replace him. To me, tackles are the most overrated stat. There's no stat more overrated than tackles. And it's funny because, Denzel Perryman made the Pro Bowl for the Raiders 2 years ago because of how many tackles he had, right? He's a Pro Bowler because of those tackles. And I remember talking about it on Twitter, like, hey, tackles are overrated. I remember I actually put a ranking out where I went like semi-viral within Raider Nation, the Raider Nation fans and the people on Twitter that have the bigger accounts. A lot of people were talking shit because I ranked Malcolm Kuntz ahead of Denzel Perryman. They're like, why would you rank Malcolm Kuntz ahead of a Pro Bowl linebacker? And it all comes down to this. Linebackers are a hard position to get right. You and I were just talking about this before we started this video. We're talking about Cooper, the rookie linebacker that went to the Packers. You can take a linebacker, and there's a reason why linebackers aren't being drafted as high anymore.
Yeah,
right? When you take
running backs to the defense.
Right. When you take Quay Walker with the 22nd overall pick, and then Fred Warner, who's a third round pick, comes out and ends up having a great career, it makes you think, like, should we stop investing in linebackers? And that too, linebackers don't last that long. Right? Linebackers are kind of like running backs, right? Where they don't have super, super long careers. Diablo, on the other end, I don't know. I don't know why this guy has not been able to put it together, because he has everything there. But Luke Masterson, man, I think is the guy that's going to replace him. I think we're going to start to see that this season.
I love Luke Masterson, man. I don't know why he doesn't get as much love as he possibly should. Shout out to everybody in the chat really quickly. Yo, guys, I'm sorry I'm not reading the chats like I normally do, but Sanjit's in the place, so I know you guys are watching the barbecue. We're cooking over here, man. Shout out to the almost 700 in the room. Get wasted with your brother Wasted. Look, this is the thing. When you talk about Divine Diablo and you talk about linebacker play, the one thing that I noticed from him is that he does not play downhill.
Right.
He's a very reactive linebacker. He doesn't have the instincts that you would want to see from a guy playing his position. You want to see him playing more downfield. I'm going to be honest with you. The one thing about Luke Masterson that I see is that he has the brain. He understands. He's aggressive. He's a special teams guy. I think that's helped Luke Masterson develop.
Absolutely.
The one problem with Luke Masterson that I do see is that he's very, very limited athletically.
Right.
He's very limited athletically, and in coverage, he's a liability. And I think that's one of the reasons why he hasn't played. Now, last year, Divine Diablo got a lot better in coverage. So I have to give him, flowers in that perspective. But Tommy Eichenberg is a guy that I'm excited to see. I watched a lot of him at Ohio State. He's a guy, but I think he's more of a guy that, might be a future green dot. He might kind of play the role that Robert Spillane is playing right now. So I don't know if Tommy Eichenberg is going to get that much burn. But, like you said, linebacker is a very, very strange position. It's been devalued over the last 8 to 10 years in the National Football League. It has become the running back of the defense.
Absolutely.
So it's weird, man. There are guys on the scrap heap right now. I don't want to, I can go on the spot track really quickly and see who's available. But I don't think the Raiders are I think we're doing the development thing in-house.
Right.
Now, as far as our secondary goes, I want to go out there. We doing the state of the Raiders right now, right? The secondary. Man, how do you feel about that secondary, man? 'Cause I'm really excited about our safety room.
I love our secondary, man. It's crazy because a secondary won't be good unless you have a good D-line, right? Like, you can have good corners, but they can't cover forever. Right? If you don't have a D-line that can get after, it makes it hard. But if you have a D-line that's legit, I mean, if you have a good secondary, that's going to get bumped up even more. And our defense line should be one of the best defensive lines this year. The fact that Jack Jones, he looked really good last year. I have super high hopes for Jack Jones, right? And I hope I'm not ranking or, whatever, overhyping him or whatever. I think Jack Jones could become, and he might not become like, Darrelle Revis or Jalen Ramsey. He might not become those type of corners, but he can be like Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, Deion Sanders. He can be in that mold where he's able to make plays. And, I'm cool with Jack Jones giving up 4 touchdowns this season if he has, 7, 8 forced turnovers, right? If he has key pass breakups and those type of things, right? I think Jack Jones can be a really, really solid football player this year. I think Trayvon Merrick's going to be really solid. I think Paul Mao is going to break out. And then Jacorian Bennett is kind of a wild card, but he has 2 interceptions in the, this past week in the minicamp portion. Yeah. And then I think Nate Hobbs is severely underrated. Yeah. And I always say this, and me and my brother were having a conversation about Nate Hobbs recently. We're talking about his contract and what he'll end up getting. My brother started looking at some of the other cornerbacks that are really, really highly paid. Yeah. Right. And I told my brother, I said, the slot corner and the outside corner, even though they both have the name corner in the position, they're not the same position, right? If you're a boundary cornerback, it is completely different. Oftentimes you don't have a run fit, right? If you're a slot corner, you're going to be involved a lot more, right? To me, being an outside corner versus slot corner is completely different. And I think Hobbs, although he's not a top 5 guy in coverage, right? No. But what he can do is he can make tackles. He can punch the ball out. You line him up against, slot guys that may be a little bit more shifty. He can cover those guys, right? Now, he may get beat if you put Tyreek Hill on the slot and Tyreek Hill runs deep. He may get beat by that, But if Hobbs can get his hands on you, he's strong. He's smart. I think Nate Hobbs is arguably our 3rd best player in our defense, right? Right after Max. Yes, arguably definitely. Our 2nd best after Max, right? I know, Christian Wilkins is a phenomenal football player, but I think that highly of Nate Hobbs. I think he's a stud.
Yeah, I do too. It's the thing, it's hard to kind of gauge how you're going to pay him, right? You right. Just said that, because if you're going to pay him top end money, right, he has to be a guy that has to be able to actually play his position. And Nate Hobbs playing on the outside is definitely not the same player. Right. He's not the same player. He's a downhill, damn near will linebacker. Right. That's really what he is. Absolutely. And for us, he has a level of importance that he won't have for other teams, right? Because it's the way we play. And I think that we have to keep that context when you talk about paying the Nate Hobbs going forward, because for the Raiders, he makes a lot of sense. For other teams, he doesn't. So I don't think he will have the as robust of a market. Right. And I think we'll be able to re-sign him. I love what Tom Telesco is doing with the extra cap space that we got from Jimmy Garoppolo. Right. He's sitting up there and he's looking to the future. He's not going out there and going crazy and being fiscally irresponsible, because he knows that we have to re-sign a lot of these guys, man. The thing about our corner room that I love, as far as Jack Jones goes, is Jack Jones is a blue chip talent. He always has been. And the thing that has always been the knock on him is up here, as far as, is he going to get in trouble? Right. He's in a situation with a coach that he's known since he was a boy. Right. This is a guy that's in his corner, their family. Right. He's, Antonio Pierce coached him in high school, college, and now in the National Football League. So this is the best case scenario, period. This is the best case scenario, period, for him. And shout out to my brother Intel and the place to be, man.
Another thing I want to say with Jack Jones is, Jack Jones is not, he's not Damon Arnett, right? Those are two different people. Jack Jones is actually a really good person. He puts the effort in. He wants to be great, right? So it's not like the guy is, and he made a mistake, right? He made a mistake with the whole Patriot situation where I think one was he had the whole, he didn't know how to properly secure his firearm going into the airport. I think the other thing was something to do with like missing the curfew in the team hotel. The guy's a good person, right? He puts the effort in. He just made a bad decision, right? And it is not the same as Damon Arnett, because I saw some people comment that when I did a Jack Jones short, I think last week, I was like, hey, this guy's going to break out. People were saying, hey, man, this is going to be the next Damon Arnett. It's just a matter of time. I'm sure they were trolling, but I think there's a lot of upside with Jack Jones.
Damon Arnett didn't play one meaningful snap in the national
Absolutely.
Like,
never cared. Right.
The F are they talking about? Sanjit, I mean, listen, I got it. The F is wrong with these people. I'm sorry, man. Like, how could you compare a guy who's probably had the prettiest interception in the last 15 years,
right,
to Damon, high stakes, high caliber weapon Arnett?
Right.
Right. With the burgundy beehive dreads. Get the F out of here, man. I'm sorry, Sanjit. I have to do a little wasted stuff here. What the F is wrong with these people, man? Now, transitioning. There's another position that I am a little concerned about, and I know you might be too. It's the running back position. We're going to transition to the offensive side of football. Zamir White. I like what I saw from him in the last 4 games. I don't know if it's enough for me to feel, confident and happy about the decision we made to let Josh Jacobs walk. The more Josh Jacobs talks, I'm happier and happier that he's no longer with the team. I'm going to be perfectly honest, not to be the emotional Raider fan, but nobody needs that kind of nonsense.
Right. I wanted the Raiders to get rid of Josh Jacobs for 2 years now, man. He's just, I don't know, right? But to me, Josh Jacobs comes off very selfish as a player, right? When you look at, Max Crosby took less money when he initially signed his contract, as did Colton Miller, as did Derek Carr, took less money. Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, all these guys took less money, and I feel like Josh Jacobs was trying to get, top dollar. And he's a good running back. The running back position doesn't matter all that much, right? And I do hope Zamir White does have success, but I am worried about it. I would be lying to you if I wasn't worrying about it. One of the things I always do with running backs, and this is for like fantasy football purposes, is I look at guys that have, let's say, Zamir White, for example, last year had almost 80 carries, right? And what I'll do is I'll take away his 7 longest runs of the season. So we'll remove his 7 longest runs, and then we'll look at the other 73 carries or whatever he had, right? And usually, if a running back still has, a high number in terms of, per carry, yards per carry, usually you'll be able to tell, okay, if a guy's going to have success. Maybe you watch a little bit of tape to kind of see that. With Zamir White, it goes down a lot. Like, he ends up with like 3.4 yards per attempt. If you just remove, like, I think he had one against the Chiefs that was like, it was a massive carry against the Chiefs. He had a couple other, I think another one was against the Chiefs, like 20 yards. Then he had a couple other that were like 18, 10, 15. So if you remove like his 6 or 7 highest, longest runs, Zamir White's per yard average comes down a lot. And I say all that, not that I care about stats all that much, but I say all that because I've watched Zamir White's tape, right? I watched Zamir White struggle in the preseason when we were like, hey, this guy's going to take over. Josh Jacobs is holding out. We don't need Josh Jacobs. I remember everybody was excited for Zamir White until we saw him play. And then we're all like, you got to bring back Josh Jacobs. This is not going to work out, right? And then even during the season, White had some carries, but he struggled. Right. But he did have success. And I'll say this. He did have success after Antonio Pierce took over, and he finished strong. And there is some hope in that. Right. And our offense line will be a lot better this year. It's a whole new scheme. So I do hope all that works out and the Raiders do have success. But I am not going to lie if I tell you I'm not worried about the running back position for the Raiders, because Alexander Mattison had 2 years to take over the Vikings job. And he failed at it. He failed miserably, and he got benched twice last year because he had fumbling issues. Amir Abdullah's, he's a good running back. But he's a third down back. He's special teams type guy. And then you got the rookie running back, and you got the other 2 guys that are younger, Britton Brown, Sincere McCormick.
Yeah.
I don't know how the Raiders running back position is going to look this year. I don't know if we're going to have that explosive ability. I don't know if we're even going to have explosiveness on the offense. Like outside of Trey Tucker, I feel like our offense is kind of slow.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of explosiveness on his offense as far as from a speed perspective. I
Right.
think when you talk about 40 times in actual football explosiveness, we do have some explosive guys. We have the Brock Bowers of the
Brock
world.
Bowers, right.
Yeah, we have Dylan Labe looks pretty explosive in context, right? But I think when you talk about Zamir White in context, we got to have the full context of this. Zamir White is a punch. He's a pitch count running back.
Right.
He is a running back that he gets stronger as the game goes on. He is a running back. He's a physical bruising back. You can't take a back like that and give him 8 carries and think that he's going to, do well.
Right.
And if you look at the upswing in his longest runs, they all came when he was the featured back. Now, we say we're going to have a running back by committee, but I don't believe that. I think that Zamir White is going to get 80% of the carries this year. He has to. That is what kind of running back he is. And I think in that context, he is a guy who I'm expecting to have at least 1,000 yards because that's what kind of back he is. Because Josh Jacobs was here last year. We got to remember that.
Right. It's interesting that you say that. I need Zamir White to prove it. Another thing I will say with this is too, when I look at the run game, in the past, 6-7 years ago, teams ran the ball a lot, right? You'd run the ball, you'd pound the ball, and then you'd set up your passing game, right? I feel like nowadays teams are throwing the ball more, and that sets up your run game, right? Like, for example, I feel like one of the reasons why running backs don't get paid as much is because teams want, they want their running backs to be able to pick up. And to me, when I look at what teams are doing now, right, teams care more about the yards per touch by the running back as opposed to let's give this guy 20 carries in a game, right? So like you look at a guy like Davante Adams of the Dolphins, the guy will have 8 touches and he'll put up 80 yards, right? That's the production you want out of guys, right? And with Zamir White, I wouldn't, he has 12 carries that go for 35 yards, and then it's that 13th carry that he picks up 30 yards. Right? Yeah. I want him to pick up 30 yards on the first 3 carries, right? Or at least from my running backs, I want to see that type of production. But I do agree with you, right? Zamir White's strong as hell. He's one of he's one of the strongest running backs I think that are in the NFL, right? Yeah. And Derrick Henry took a couple years, right? I think it was his 3rd year where Derrick Henry really took off, right? And I would hope Zamir White can kind of go into that same mold where he's a power back and it really just comes together.
Yeah, and with Derrick Henry in context, Derrick Henry the numbers showed a lot more because he was the featured player in that offense at that point. Right. You know what I mean? Where Zamir White didn't have that kind of fortune. Right. So listen, man, it's preparation meeting opportunity, right? He didn't have the opportunity to carry the ball as much. The thing about it is with a running back like Zamir White, right, where people say that he struggled with vision, think the zone blocking scheme favors his style of run. Oh, yeah. And they did a lot of zone stuff when he was at Georgia.
Right.
So look, man, Zamir White is a guy that I'm not as worried about. The most thing that I'm worried about with Zamir White is, can he catch the ball out of the backfield? Can he hold on to the football? Right. And when they spell him, can Madison or one of these younger guys like a Sincere McCormick or Britton Brown or Dylan Labe come in and spell him and give us productive carries? Because as you said, it's more of a ratio of yardage as opposed to, back in the day, the old Bill Parcells days, the old, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Keep running the football. Eventually he's going to break through. No, they want to see production in context. They want to say, hey, listen, man, if we're going to give you, 10 or 11% of our snaps on offense, this is what we want to see from you. Right. We want to see, if we're giving you 10 carries, we want to see explosive plays. We're going to sit you down and we're going to throw the football. Because we don't need to do this. This is a throwing league at this point.
Right. Yeah, that's the tough thing, right? When you look at the Raiders, because Telesco told us to be running back by committee, right? But that doesn't mean like, on first down we're gonna run this guy, and then second down it's completely different. That's not what running back by committee means, right? It means whoever they feel like is having the most success, that's going to be the guy. And that's not going to just change every other game, right? Yeah. If Zamir White struggles week 2, but has a great week 3, and then struggles week 4, they're not going to change him out come week 5. Like they're going to stick with him.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be an interesting year for the Raiders this year, man, because we're going to learn so much about this team as we go into this season. The quarterback position may not be perfect this year. We're going to find out if Aiden O'Connell is the quarterback of the future. We're going to find out if, we have our right tackle of the future. We're going to find out, is our defense actually legit, or was it just a 1 year, fluke? Like, was it just these guys got lucky and they're just happened to be fired up, or are they actually legit? And I'm excited for that to really come this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, man. When you talk about the Raiders and you talk about last year, I am a realistic fan, and so are you, right? We have a responsibility with our platforms because
right.
We have to give facts, right? We have to be factual.
All right.
If I'm being honest, the Raiders beat in some of the wins that they beat 4 backup quarterbacks.
Right.
Right. So everything that's going on now, we're very excited. We talk about the Chargers game. We wrecked the Chargers, but we pretty much beat their 3rd string quarterback, right?
Right.
Talk about the Giant game. We wrecked Tommy DeVito. It's not like we went out there and beat Joe Montana here, right?
Right.
You talk about the Jet game. There was no Aaron Rodgers out there on the center.
Right.
Right. The most legitimate signature win that we had was against the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas. And this is a game where our quarterback didn't complete a pass in the whole second half.
Right.
So that win is an anomaly, right? So when we start talking about that, and then Denver, if we're being honest, is Jarrett Stidham really their starter?
Right. Yeah.
So look, and I'm not shitting all on the Raiders at all, but what I'm saying is there are a lot of open-ended questions here, and that's why I'm so excited. And what I see, and let's put a pin in this. I see the reason, and this is the reason why I believe the Raiders are going to be good. And his name is Max Crosby.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of people, think that's a lot of rah-rah fan stuff, but it's not. Because when you watch the Raider pressers, when you watch Media Day, then the one constant that you hear on both sides of the football, the coaching staff, the team assistants, is his name. And he has elevated the work rate of this team. He has united this team. You don't have any off the field stuff. That's why, as a content creator, this is a year where it's like, well, damn, there's nothing going on. It's not like, Sanjit, you've been doing this a lot longer than me. In other years, there's always something where we're like, oh my God, it's not happening this year, bro.
Right.
There's nothing right here. I mean, am I wrong, bro?
Right. No, I agree with you, man. You know what? I think that just goes down to show that I think we're headed down the right direction. Hiring Tom Telesco, and I know some people will say, oh, the Chargers never had success or whatever. A general manager should not be judged based off of wins and losses. You can't judge them off of that, because wins and losses are a coach stat, right? If you have a good offensive coach, you're going to win games, right? If you have a good defensive coach, you're going to win games. The Raiders, we don't know if their coaching staff's legit, so we may not win games, but I can tell you right now, Tom Telesco is a legit general manager, right? Yeah. The Chargers had a legit roster last year, and even the years before that. They went all in because they thought, hey, we got a quarterback on a rookie contract. We're going to go all in. We're going to sign all these corners and safeties and linebackers. We're going to get these running backs and receivers, whatever it is. And it didn't work out that way for him. But Tom Telesco did a really, really good job, right? And I think with the Raiders, we're seeing that as well, right? Like, Josh Jacobs, if we pay Josh Jacobs, let's say, $13 million or whatever the rate was for a running back. If we made that investment in Josh Jacobs, to me, that's a bad investment, because we may not win a lot of games this year. Right? This year might be just the year we're figuring out who our starting right tackle is for 2 years down the line. Mm-hmm. We're figuring out what Tyree Wilson has. Should we pay Malcolm Kuntz? Should we bring this guy back and give him $20 million? Right? I think this is the year we're going to figure all that out. Now, we may have success this year. We may not. Right. But I do think the Raiders roster is just in such a better spot. And I'm glad that, even Dave Ziegler, even Mike Mayock, I know we trashed Mike Mayock, we trashed Dave Ziegler because we put Ziegler with Josh McDaniels. But I think our general managers the past couple of regimes, they've done some good things. Right? Yeah. Max Crosby was a phenomenal pick. Right. Yeah. And the thing with Max is, like, he's not a top 7 defensive end. He's probably the second best defensive end. At worst, he's the 3rd best defensive end in the NFL, right? You can only say Myles Garrett and TJ Watt are better, right? And I probably would put Max second to Myles Garrett, right? I'm honest, right? Myles Garrett's different, right?
Yeah, Myles Garrett's a freak of nature,
right? It's just different, But Matt, and we didn't take Max Crosby in the first, second round. We took this guy in the fourth round, right? So it's that much better. And then Malcolm Kuntz. Kuntz this year could become like a top 10 to 12 guy. We took him in the third round, right? So we've gotten some good pieces through Mike Mayock, and now even with Dave Ziegler, right? Like we swapped Darren Waller for Trey Tucker. Like how crazy of a trade is that?
That was one of the listen, that was one of the best trades in our favor that we've ever had, man. And now that Darren Waller's out of football, that's a win for the Raiders. And we didn't have a lot of those going forward. I'm going to be honest with you, man. When you talk about Max Crosby is one of the top 3 best defensive linemen in the National Football League, and not 3, right?
Right.
And then going into the Malcolm Kuntz thing, when you look at Malcolm Kuntz, bro, you have to compare him to a guy like a Bryce Huff.
Right.
Bryce Huff got a really, really big bag of money. Right. But if you look at the amount of snaps that Bryce Huff got and the amount of snaps that Malcolm Kuntz got, it's not even close. Like Bryce Huff got probably almost 200 more snaps.
Right.
And when you start looking at the production
right.
from Malcolm Kuntz, I think Malcolm Kuntz really this year at worst will be a top 13 guy at his position. So that's a win for the Raiders.
I totally agree. You know, it's crazy because Huff got a contract. I think the other guy was Jonathan Grenard, was with the Texans. He got like $18 million as well. These guys all kind of broke out this past season, but those guys played a lot more than Kuntz. Kuntz had all his production in like the second half of the year. I think actually statistically, Kuntz, I think, might have outpaced Max Crosby in the second half of the year, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yo, that's an unbelievable to outpace Max Crosby. Right. That means he's elevated. And one thing that I heard from Patrick Graham that made me very hopeful is that he's teaching the younger guys. So that means that his mind has opened up now. Now he is a guy who understands exactly what he's doing. He's not living off athletic talent. Really quickly, Sanjit, I was going to read some of these supers. My guy S. Dot with the $5 holler, man. I see people are slightly seeing the truth about JPJ. But I was telling people that Van Pran is more film proven with his round blocking and passing. I think he meant run blocking and pass blocking. Listen, Van Pran, I like Van Pran, right? But JPJ, if I'm being honest, I understand the pick because if you're going to take him and make him a center, he's probably an all-pro center. So I understand the pick. Van Pran is probably going to be a decent offensive lineman. I don't know if he's going to be a stud or a star. He reminded me a lot of Gabe Jackson, to be honest with you, man. My guy, Quadre Samsonine, salute soldiers. Yeah, a lot of these W's last year were empty calories, but I know if Davies gives the regime 5 years, we will be back with longevities. Thank you, Quadre. Appreciate you for the $10 holler. My guy, Sweet Jazz. The Lawrence deal has me concerned. Average to good QBs are going to want 50 to 60 mil. I'd rather draft a QB every year and maintain a dominant defense. I'm not excited about picking up Prescott. Listen, bro, let me tell you something. And I don't even want to get into this because that's conjecture. The Raiders are not going to sign Dak Prescott. Essentially, what you have is you have a more athletic Derek Carr. That's what Dak Prescott is. Nobody's going to bring Dak Prescott in. What we're doing with Aiden O'Connell is the perfect thing because this is the thing. If we're a terrible football team, and Sanjit will probably mirror my sentiment. If we're terrible, that means we're picking at the top of the draft.
Right.
So that means we have a chance to draft a stud on a rookie deal. Right. If we do get Aiden O'Connell to play a coherent level of football, now that's a good problem to have. Right. That's a good problem to have, man. I don't think the Raiders, the way this roster is set up and the way Tom Telesco set up, is going to go out there and spend $60 to $50 million a year for a guy who's never won a damn thing in the National Football League.
That'd be terrible, man. That'd be absolutely terrible. I don't hate Dak Prescott, but I hate paying any quarterback 50, 60 million. Like I say this, I don't know if you agree with this, but we may have talked about this last time I was on your show, but yeah, I think an offensive coach, whoever your offensive coordinator is, play caller, I think that's more important than your quarterback. Right? I think Andy Reid is more important than Patrick Mahomes. Not saying that Patrick Mahomes isn't great, right? But Patrick Mahomes doesn't have the same success if he's with Josh McDaniels, right? Kyle Shanahan took Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl, right? And I don't even think Brock Purdy's that good, but he's having success with Brock Purdy. You know, Kyle Shanahan one day is going to find Patrick Mahomes. Just a matter of time when that happens. And he's going to win Super Bowls with that, right? But Kyle Shanahan has success without his quarterback, right? He'll be in the playoffs every year. Sean McVay's in the playoffs every year. All right.
I mean, look at Todd Monken. Look what Todd Monken meant to Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Lamar Jackson, he turned Lamar Jackson into an MVP.
Absolutely. Having a great play caller is so damn underrated. And that's why you don't pay a quarterback 50, 60 million, especially like go out and get Dak Prescott and pay him that type of money. Right? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. Now let me ask you a quick question, man. And I know we're getting a little long and late. We're gonna start bringing the train into the track, but really quickly, Sanjit, when the whole thing went down with us having to go out there and stop on a dime and go and getting another offensive coordinator, it was something that really at first, I was sitting there and I was like Cliff Kingsbury and I got excited. And then when I start really thinking about it, right, the air raid offense is something that works in the first year. And then after you figure it out, it doesn't work so great. Now, I've seen, Cliff Kingsbury run that air raid in college. I've seen him run it, in the national, he ran it in the National Football League with the number 1 pick. You know what I mean? Very, very productive in the first year, made the playoffs, won, I think, 11 straight. And you know what I mean, with Kyler Murray. And then it came to a screeching halt once they got a lot of film on it. Once Kyler Murray started getting dinged up. Kyler Murray's a small guy, right? So when Cliff Kingsbury turned the job down and left, I said to myself, I said, you know what, man, this might not be the worst thing in the world, right? But then for us to go out and go bring in a guy in Luke Getsy that a lot of people are being kind of a prisoner of the moment. And, and I didn't want to do that. I had to look into Luke Getsy's history. And I remember Luke Getsy being with Green Bay. One thing Luke Getsy doesn't get credit for is the development of Jordan Love. One thing Luke Getsy doesn't get credit for is how he used his tight ends in Green Bay, how he developed and helped, with that running game. Do you think that Luke Getsy, coming from where he came from, right, could be a guy, because he's kind of on the Shanahan tree as well. You know what I mean? He's on the Shanahan tree as well because, the head coach in Green Bay came from that San Francisco 49er lineage, right?
Right.
Do you think that Luke Getsy could probably mature to be one of those minds? Because, I mean, a lot of people are not very high on Luke Getsy, and we'd have to see all of that. But, I'm hoping that if Luke Getsy is any good, we keep him. But I will say this. If Luke Getsy is the issue, Antonio Pierce needs to cut bait and fire him immediately and go seek that offensive mind quickly. I don't think that's a guy that you can be patient with, to be honest with you.
Yeah, one of the shitty things with the Raiders is, we did hire Cliff Kingsbury before we hired Luke Getsy, right? We can't forget about that, right? The Raiders interviewed Luke Getsy. The Raiders interviewed Cliff Kingsbury. We looked at both guys and we said, we want Cliff Kingsbury. And we hired him, right? And then last minute, he ended up going to the Commanders. And the Raiders then had to go to their second guy, which was Luke Getsy at that time. And I don't even know if he was our second guy. Because
I don't think it was. I heard he was the third guy because it was somebody else.
Right, because we interviewed other guys. Guys took positions. And, look, I have my second YouTube channel called The Football Scout. The Bears are one team I cover. I have probably 4 teams I cover every single week. I got the Bears, the Cowboys, the Seahawks. And I have a couple other teams that I cover on that channel. But it's primarily 5 or 6 teams. But the Bears are one of the teams that I covered. And I've watched every single one of their games last year. Bears fans hated Luke Getsy. Like it wasn't close. People hated Luke Getsy. And every time I would watch tape, I would hear these comments. And then I would watch for those things. And I saw it. All right. So one of the things that would happen is the spacing was terrible. Luke Getsy's offense spacing was really, really bad. Right, guys were all clumped together. They would run routes, and they'd all kind of end up in the same spot. And it's not designed that way, right? Luke Getsy isn't designing guys to run at the same spot. But what's happening is it's being coached. And it's not processing to the wide receivers, and they end up running into each other, right? And I saw that a lot last year, right? It was bad offense, and that was Luke Getsy's first time trying to install his playbook. Right, it was the first time he had to actually, go from the Packers, leave that system, and then go and do it himself. You said something to the tune of, giving Luke Getsy credit for Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love is going to become the second or third best quarterback this year, right? I think Jordan Love's an absolute baller. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks.
I think he's a stud too.
But here's the thing, I wouldn't give Luke Getsy the credit for developing Jordan Love, right? I think Jordan Love is going to have success and be great because of Matt LaFleur, not because of Luke Getsy or any other offensive coach, right? And it's the same thing with anyone with the 49ers, right? If Deebo Samuel has a lot of success with the Niners, it's because of Kyle Shanahan and how he designs his play and how he puts guys in position to have success. Like I wouldn't give credit to the wide receivers coach there, right? I wouldn't do that, right? Even, Davante Adams having a great career, right? I know Luke Getsy was there when that kind of happened and that development happened. And I know he's a part of it, but, I find it hard to believe if, you took any other coach that Davante Adams wouldn't have been a great player regardless, right? I think Davante Adams became great partly because of the Mike McCarthy offense at that time. And then Matt LaFleur got there, and Matt LaFleur is a great offensive coordinator. Matt LaFleur is the guy that's kind of overlooked in that Kyle Shanahan tree.
That lineage, right? Yeah, definitely.
People kind of overlook him, but LaFleur is a top 7 or 8 coach in the NFL. The guy's a great coach, and he has his quarterback now. This year, the Packers are going to end up they're going to compete for the Super Bowl this year, right? To me, I'm not as high on Luke Getsy, and I'm open about that, right? It's not hate, right? Because I can tell you guys, hey, I love Jackson Paris Johnson. Hey, I love Christian Wilkins. I love the pick and Jack Jones. Love these guys. But I'm also going to be honest with what I don't like, right? Theron Munford's a guy that I've criticized. Yeah. And Luke Getsy's a guy I will 100% criticize, even more than Theron Munford, because, if the Chicago Bears 2 years ago signed Kyle Shanahan as their offensive coordinator, right? Matt Eberflus is the head coach. Kyle Shanahan becomes the offensive coordinator. Do you think Justin Fields would have been traded, or do you think they would have been competing in the playoffs every year?
See, it's weird because Justin Fields is a guy that is a 1-read, 2-read quarterback. He doesn't seem to be grasping the concept of offensive football. And a lot of his numbers is like compiler stuff. Like when they're getting blown out, he'll take off and run and score a touchdown or throw a touchdown at the end of the game. Justin Fields has played very bad, Sanjit. Like I don't see any accuracy. I don't see what happened.
Yeah, I think it's debatable, right? Because Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson sucked his first few years, but coaching got him right. He's one of the best quarterbacks now, right? I think it comes down to coaching. I will always say a quarterback has success based off of coaching. And I know Justin Fields has not looked great, but he's had moments. He's had flashes as well, right? Especially this last year, Fields had good moments. Another thing to keep in mind is, if the Bears had, let's say, the 15th overall pick this year, right? So the Bears finished with the 9th overall pick, right? They didn't finish with the number 1 overall pick. That happened to be the Panthers pick. If the Bears did not have the number 1 overall pick, they wouldn't have drafted a quarterback. They would have went into this upcoming season with Justin Fields.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a guy that they were invested in and they drafted him. I mean, the only thing is that let's not forget, when you talk about Kyle Shanahan is also the guy who drafted Trey Lance, and he wasn't able to turn him into a star. And this is a guy who was drafted before Justin Fields. So,
right. But to be fair with that, right? Because I always hear that. I always hear that Trey Lance gets brought up. The thing with Trey Lance is it didn't work out, but Trey Lance was the quarterback for Kyle Shanahan, and then he got hurt. Right? He played one game. Second week of him starting in his NFL career, he got hurt. Right, and then from there,
in the rain. Remember that? It was in Chicago.
Right. So he got hurt, and then from that point, they ended up, he wasn't healthy. Brock Purdy came out of nowhere, and you got a choice to make at that point, right? And they decided to go down the route of what would have made sense essentially for them, right? I know the Trey Lance thing obviously did not work for Kyle Shanahan, but it's not like that entire time they weren't in the Super Bowl every year or competing for the Super Bowl, right? They're a Super Bowl roster, and I think it's different if the 49ers weren't a Super Bowl roster, and then maybe you give Trey Lance a little bit longer to develop or whatever, but, Shanahan's competing for the Super Bowl, right? So I think it's a little bit different with Trey Lance and kind of moving off that a little bit quicker, right? But just getting back to Luke Getsy, do you think Luke Getsy is going to run a top 10 offense for the Raiders? Because our weapons are there. There's no questions about it.
I believe that's contingent on how well Aiden O'Connell does in his offense. I think with Luke Getsy's offense, and when you talk about LaFleur's offense, a lot of it is timing, accuracy, getting the football out. That's a lot of what it is with Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan, there's always they're very good at scheming players open and getting them in one-on-one situations, right? So this is about making that decision at the line of scrimmage, dropping back, being decisive with where you deliver the football, and getting it in the hand of your playmakers. That's really their offense in a nutshell, right? So when you look at what happens in Green Bay, they get the ball to their running back. The running back breaks a big play, right? That's how it always has kind of been, right? I believe with the players that we have, I don't know if it'd be top 10, but I believe we can get into the teens if Aiden O'Connell can play coherent football. Because I don't think Aiden O'Connell is going to come in and light the world up. A lot of people like to compare him to Tom Brady. That's an anomaly. He's the greatest quarterback probably ever played the game, right?
Right.
So I don't want to do that. But when I look at Aiden O'Connell, if he can have a Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of a year, I believe we're a top 15 to 13 offense. And that's good enough with a defense that I think is going to kind of hover around the top 5.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to come down to the quarterbacks for sure, right? For us to have success. Now, one of the interesting things, and this is kind of a two-part thing. Gardner Minshew in OTAs. Gardner Minshew makes plays with his legs, right? Aiden O'Connell's the better passer. So in OTAs, when you're just throwing the football, Aiden O'Connell's going to obviously look better, right? But I don't know if you've heard the reports. Some of the guys some of the Raiders beat reporters have trashed the quarterbacks. I think it was Vincent Monsignor and Tashawn Reed. Both guys were like, "Hey, the quarterbacks look terrible. Like it was bad." Right? I think one guy said something like they basically just continuously hit the running backs in the flats. They weren't able to push the ball downfield. And I know it's early, and I know it's only OTAs, and but this is like 7-on-7 stuff, right? Where there's no O-line, there's no D-line, there's no pass rush. It's just purely throwing the football. Have you heard that report? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I've heard it, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I think there's a bit of and no disrespect to Sean Reed and Vincent Bonsier. They do great work. They're in camp, but the way I see it is, this Raider defense has been together 3 years.
Right.
This Raider defense has most of the talent on. We have talent on both sides of the ball, but we have a young quarterback and we have 2 quarterbacks that are coming in fresh, learning this scheme, playing against one of the better defenses in the National Football League. So if they're lighting the Raiders defense up, I'm more concerned about the defense. I would expect for these guys to struggle against a defense like this. I really would, because these guys don't have to wonder about the scheme. They've been in it for 3 years. They could just react and play free. I think there's a learning curve with this offense, and steel sharpens steel, right? So when you see them having to go up against one of the better units, that I think it's going to be one of the better. They got to go out there and prove it. But I think it's going to be one of the units that they're going to have to go against every week. It's going to improve this offense. I can't totally trash Aiden O'Connell and all these guys when Davante Adams really hasn't been in OTAs yet.
Right.
Davante Adams make things a lot different, right? I can't trash Aiden O'Connell and these guys when they're not really hitting each other, right? And it's just player on player. You got a rookie, it's a lot. The one thing that I've heard is that Michael Mayer has shined, right? Trey Tucker has shined, right? Jacoby Myers is a guy that I've heard a lot about. So I really don't. I think a lot of that kind of stuff, Sanjit, and I'm gonna be real with you. I think that's the kind of stuff that sells papers.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I do. No disrespect to those guys. I'm not trying to attack their credibility, but I think that they have to have something to write about, because to be honest with you, from a content standpoint, this has been a pretty damn boring offseason. That's great for us as fans.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think Antonio Pierce said basically the same thing on Friday when he did his presser. He basically said, hey, the defense has been here now for 3 years. The offense, first year they're installing their offense, they're gonna struggle, right? It's, 4 weeks since they've gotten together, they're gonna struggle, and I agree with that. It makes sense, right? There is one concern I do have with Luke Getsy specifically. I had heard this in the past, and I think Justin Fields said this in a presser last year as well. He talked a little bit about how Luke Getsy's offense is too complicated. He puts way too much stuff, too many calls, too many different things in the offense. I think one of the reasons why Luke Getsy coming in as an offensive coach to the Bears, he had to install the offense. He had to teach everyone from start, right? Scratch. These guys don't know anything. He has to install everything. The one thing I do like with the Raiders is now he's doing it for a second time, right? He's installing an offense for the second time. Paul Gunther years ago, right? He was Raiders defensive coach. I think it was Will Compton, right? Will Compton came out and was like, hey, this guy would have like 80 calls for us. It was way too complicated, right? And that was one of the reasons why the Raiders failed, right? And that was the first time Paul Gunther ever had to install a defense, and he failed at it. He wasn't able to install the defense, right? Because installing your playbook, your offense, your defense, that's a hard thing to do. People just overlook it, and they just think that like every coach comes in and they just have success right away being able to implement their offense and kind of teach the language and those type of things is not easy. It's a hard thing to do. Getsy apparently has made it complicated on guys in the past. And I think when I read the report that, hey, quarterbacks are struggling and guys are kind of struggling, that was one of the things that I kind of thought about in my mind, because I had heard about it in the past, that he makes it a little bit too complicated. And I kind of hope that's not happening here.
Well, bro, I'm going to be honest with you, Sanjit. Is it too complicated? Was it too complicated for Justin Fields? Because Justin Fields is a guy.
I hear you.
Because Tyler Bagent came in and beat us with Luke Getsy's offense. Threw the ball all over the field. This guy is some car salesman. He came in and beat us.
Right, but I agree with what you're saying with that, right? Is a guy came in, but that was more of the wild card factor. I think we went with the wrong quarterback in that game as well, right? I think we went forward with Hoyer as opposed to Aiden O'Connell.
Ryan high stakes Hoyer, man.
But to I still we don't know if Justin Fields is gonna be a good quarterback, right? We can take the opposite approach. We can trash Justin Fields and support Luke Getsy, but in 3 years we're gonna know the truth, right? Luke Getsy's either gonna be the Raiders will be in the Super Bowl within 3 years or competing for it, and Justin Fields is on to another team, or Justin Fields will be in the playoffs competing for a Super Bowl, and the Raiders will be, Antonio Pierce is gone, Luke Getsy's gone, and we're on to a new coach, right? Like something's gonna happen in 3 years, and I just don't want to overlook and put it to the side that Luke Getsy is 100% right and Justin Fields was 100% wrong.
No, and I never want to be hyperbolic like that, but what I can look at with Justin Fields is I look at his career at Ohio State, look at all the talent he had at Ohio State. I look at the fact that I have more history in Justin Fields. Justin Fields was a guy who dropped in the draft because he has an issue with recognizing coverages and throwing the football. This is fact. This is not conjecture, right? And then you have him going to Pittsburgh and sitting behind Russell Wilson, who his days are well behind him as far as being a star quarterback. Right. So the fact that they're not even making it a quarterback competition at this point, he is the backup.
Right. Which makes sense, though. That makes sense. You're going to bring him in and make him the backup.
Yeah, it makes sense. But the problem is the guy has 1 year left on his deal. So if he doesn't show and prove with Pittsburgh, what is he going to be relegated to the rest of his career?
Well, keep in mind, Justin Fields requested a specific number of teams, right? He didn't want to just, Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, didn't say, hey, send me offers and I'll send Justin Fields whoever gives me the best offer, right? Fields told Ryan Poles, I want to go to these 4 teams. And Poles made sure that he was able to go to one of those 4 teams, right? So the Steelers happen to be one of those teams. So there's a chance Fields, even as his contract comes to an end, maybe he re-signs, 2 years or whatever. I think Fields is going to end up staying with the Steelers. And the Steelers are they're a well-run organization, right? The Steelers will always have success. It's going to be interesting, man, to see how that kind of shapes up. Yeah, versus the Raiders who took Luke Getsy, right? So we took the other guy. And the Steelers took the other, the quarterback out of that. So it's going to be interesting.
Let's see, man. I mean, one thing that I feel is when Davante Adams co-signs you, this is a guy who's seen.
That is true.
That did it for me. I just want to see, and I'm glad that Davante Adams can play free. He knows his offense. He doesn't have to wonder what's going on, and he could be a guy like he said in the presser. He's not learning this offense. He knows it, so he can go out there and really help. And it's not him just leading men. He can give them information.
Right.
Let's see what we have. Now, the one thing about the offense being too complicated, that's Justin Fields saying that. Now, when I look at Cole Kmet played great. He played great. No, he wasn't saying that.
I think there was 1 or 2 other guys that made statements regarding, hey, there's too much information. It might not have been those exact words. I think maybe it was DJ Moore, or it could have been one of the other wide receivers. Maybe it was Claypool. I can't remember exactly who it was.
Chase Claypool. No, this another guy. Chase Claypool did make that. Right. Now, this is a guy who's been a merc all over the national football.
Chase Claypool's terrible. I would not want him.
Yeah, so is it too much information, or are you a dumb football player? Look, Jimmy Johnson said this perfectly. He goes, listen, hit me in the head if I draft with a hammer if I draft a dumb football player. That's what Jimmy Johnson used to say. You got to have Bill Belichick, Jimmy Johnson, guys who have success in this league. You have to have smart players. Now, Sanjit, man, we've been rocking an hour and a half. I didn't mean to even keep you this long, bro. But bro, it's like a barbecue anytime you pull up. The man is just, you've been cooking, man. I really appreciate you for gracing this platform, bro, as you normally do. We got 750 people in the room. They're all getting wasted. Top Beats, the mod gods, the mod fathers, please do me a favor. Please put Sanjit's links in the chat. I know Sanjit is one of the pillars of Raider YouTube, so he has a way bigger platform than me. But just if there are some eyes who are not subscribed to the Football Scout, please put that in the chat so you guys can go on over there and pull up the Sanjit, man. Sanjit, I really, 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 really appreciate you, brother. I appreciate everything you've done, for my channel, over the years. You've always come up and showed love, man. And I really, really appreciate you, man. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely, man. I always appreciate coming on. I love coming on, man. I don't go live enough on my show, so I'm always happy to come on and be live, bro. I always appreciate it.
Man, thank you, brother. Yo, guys, this has been another Raider Nation Unlimited for the ages. You guys, this is going to be up. If you haven't watched it, go back and catch the rerun. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Share this thing out all over social media. But yo, we're going to get out of here. And guys, look, the goofy wasted stuff normally happens. It has to happen before Sanjit leaves. These are the worst graphics in history. But guess what, damn it? You guys know what I always say.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Damn it. With Sanjit and Wasted Together, the price just went through the roof. You guys have a terrific night, man. We are out of here, man. Peace.